Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast where we explore what's possible in the world of investing. If you've just joined us for the very first time, a huge welcome to the community. Today we have an Ask an Advisor episode for you. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. We're joined by one of our returning favorites, financial advisor Dylan Pargiter-Green. Welcome back to Equity Mates.
Did you get it?
It's close. It's close. It's close. Like, you know, it's the emphasis on the wrong part, but we'll get there one day.
How should I say?
Every time.
It's just Pargiter.
Pargiter.
Yeah, imagine
so
the I.
You
hit the G, which is good. You know,
Yeah,
I mean, it's better than Bryce. So,
And honestly, that is the hurdle I'm only trying to jump over in life. Now, for people who are unfamiliar, Dylan, you've been coming on the show for what, over a year now?
yeah, about a year.
You're a director at Bold Wealth, and you're one of the advisors that we work with to refer members of the Equity Mates community who are looking for financial advice. You're one of our hand-picked few advisors. You survived
Cream of the crop.
the rigorous selection process.
One of the most hard interview processes that I've ever been through in my entire life.
Yes.
And so if after listening to this episode with Dylan, if you are interested in speaking to him, go to equitymates.com/advice. We'll get a bit of information from you and we'll connect you with Dylan. But Dylan, last time you came on the show, you introduced us to two characters, Mr. Equity and Mrs. Mates.
Yeah.
And you worked through a case study of three separate ways of investing. Investing inside of super, investing outside of super, and offset account, and then debt recycling.
Yeah, paying off your house,
came up,
putting
yeah.
money into super, debt recycling.
Yeah.
So investment, basically, but doing it in a tax-effective way.
And you did all the work, massive report with all the numbers that people can access for free. We'll include the link to that one in the show notes and the YouTube description if people want it. But it was so popular that we asked you to go away, put your head down, do more work, and come back to us with another case study.
Yes.
Una más.
And so Mr. Mates is back.
Mr. Equity.
Mr. Equity.
is back.
Mr. Equity.
Sadly, Mrs. Mates no longer with him.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was a sensitive subject when we did the review meeting. He didn't really want to talk about it. So, you know, we only delve so far into these things. But yes, Mr. Equity, he's back. He's still with us. He's done well throughout life as well. He's built up a nice juicy share portfolio. So yeah, a couple of different strategies. He's now a little bit older. I can't remember which one of you was Mr. Equity last time, but you know, you look good for 60.
Yes. Well, yes, we should say he's 60 because today, Dylan, we're going to be talking about all things transition to retirement, because a lot of the clients that are coming through the Equity Mates network, particularly with you and where you focus a lot of your time as well, is in this sort of transition to retirement space. And so today we're going to be going through a case study looking at a couple of different ways in which you can, I guess, think about that and draw down income as you're transitioning to that nice stage of life.
Yeah. But I think before people turn off, if they're not at that point, it's important to think about this for everyone. But I think, you know, we're about to see the greatest wealth transfer in the history of the world. And, you know, Australia's going to play a big part of that. So send this to your parents, but also maybe internalize some of the lessons and encourage your parents to do it, because it can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars more to them in retirement. It can mean avoiding taxes on transfers when that wealth is passed from them to you. It can mean a whole bunch of other things that will be relevant to you over time. So just because you're not 60 like Mr. Mates doesn't mean you should skip this episode. Is that fair to say, Dylan?
That is 100% right. And like, at the end of the day, everything that we're talking about now, everyone will eventually get to that stage, whether or not it's the same legislation points, whether or not it's exactly the same as what we're talking about right now. We're all working towards this idea of like financial freedom, retirement, something along those lines. Everyone has a slightly different point at which they want to achieve that. But that's the goal, right? We all want to get to being able to not necessarily have to get up in the morning and go to work. We can choose to do so. But, you know, we want to be able to make that choice. We don't want to be forced to do it. Some good strategies for that time. I love this time of people's life. It is like, it's one of the most fun financial planning times, I think, because, you know, when we're working with accumulators, the more you do when you're younger, the better you will be, right? Like the better off you'll be. If you start investing from a really young age, you'll be in a way better spot than if you hadn't, right? I feel like I'm preaching to the choir of all choirs when
It's
I
always
say
good to be
this.
reminded,
good
though. It's
to-
always
yeah.
good. Yeah.
Like, keep investing. But, right, so many people that we talk to have this sort of turning point where they sort of wake up one morning and look in the mirror and go, holy moly, I am not going to work for much longer and I don't know what that's going to look like. And it's actually quite scary for people. Unlike someone who's in their 30s or 40s and maybe has 20 more years of work, we've got a lot of time to play with. So we can really, we can say, hey, you don't need to save that much. You don't need to do that much. Just do the basics, compound for the long term, and you'll be in a really good spot. We get to make like instant change with these people. It's awesome, right? and I mean, me, I'm a massive tax nerd, and all these things come down to how do we best structure things, and you have a lot more flexibility, you have a lot more freedom at this point. So it's one of my favorite times to plan with clients.
Other than them waking up and going, whoops, I need to, I'm kind of overwhelmed now and need to go and speak.
I wish I'd listened to
I wish
Equity Mates
I-
10 years ago.
What's like the common, I guess, characteristics or I guess mistakes that you see people making when they have that like light bulb moment? They come to see you being like, I actually don't have long left.
A lot of people are just fearful without context, right? So information is obviously power, and most people who come to see us are genuinely surprised once we get them their statement of advice that shows them what the strategies will be. Like, most of our clients have wealth that is growing at a rate that is faster than they can spend it.
Nice.
And it's wonderful. Right? It's wonderful.
You haven't seen how quickly I can spend.
Yeah. But they've grown up in different generations. Like these are clients who are at this retirement point, right? So they've bought property for 45 cents and a packet of twisties, and they've generally had superannuation that's coming in for most of their working career, or at least the back half where they've been good earners. And a lot of the time, their expectations on what they're going to spend is pretty low. So I have to have conversations with people about telling them they have to spend more money more often than I do conversations that conversations.
Why do they have to spend more money?
Because they don't want their kids to get it.
Well, yeah, okay. So it's probably more they can spend more money. Bryce is there thinking, nah, my mum's absolutely like.
Can you call my parents?
Yeah, wheat bix and water from mum. But it's one of those things that we have to help clients understand that they've worked all their life to get to this point where they have the ability to, like, they've saved and they've worked and they've done all this, and now, like, do the thing that is fun. It's the thing I say about accumulators as well. Like, do more stuff that makes you happy during the time that you can. Don't save everything that you earn, because we only get to do this once. And more often the conversation around 60 is, I now need to go and do some of this stuff because I should have done it 20 years ago.
So there's two concepts that we're going to introduce for people today, and then we're going to work through your case study with Mr. Equity and talk about how embracing these two concepts can make a meaningful difference to his retirement, but also, I guess, to the wealth transfer to his kids. So let's start with the first concept, which is transition to retirement income stream. So what is it?
So at the wonderful age of preservation, which I always think is...
I find that such an interesting
absolutely,
terminology.
I mean, if they could have picked something that didn't make you feel like
I
a
know.
raisin.
I know.
Yeah, like access.
It's
age.
like shit. Preservation
Ready
age.
to eat
God.
apricots.
Yeah.
No, so for a time was between the ages of 55 and 60, and then it slowly, gradually has now moved up to basically once you hit 60, you can access what's called a transition to retirement pension, or you get access to your superannuation. If you're still working between the ages of 60 and 65, you can't just go full barrel into your super and access, but you can open one of these TTR, a transition to retirement pensions, where you're able to access up to 10%. Now, we're not doing that just to take a whack out of superannuation and start to spend willy-nilly. Certainly wouldn't advise that unless there's, for whatever reason, you're stopping working and you've got squillions of dollars and whatever. But the majority of the time, the benefit of this is for people that are continuing to work from the age of 60 to 65. They're in a medium tax bracket, so not you're earning over the 250, 260 sort of rate. But, in between sort of the 120 and the 200 range, where your average marginal tax bracket on that money is about 39%, and you're not capping out your superannuation contributions already. What we then have the ability to do is draw down some of our superannuation balance tax-free and put some additional money into superannuation without changing the amount of income we have in the bank at the end of the day. So, for example, if I earn $100, it's taxed at 39 cents on the dollar, and I get 61 cents. If I put it into super, it's taxed at 15 cents, so I get 85 cents, right? But now what I can do is I can put the 85 cents into super. I can take 61 cents on the dollar out, $61. My pay has stayed the same, but my superannuation has grown by $24 or 24 cents on the dollar for every dollar. Now, if you do that 15 grand a year, say, every year, you've got about, 10 grand extra going into superannuation, compounding for the last sort of 7 years. So it's a nice little boost for someone, and it doesn't actually affect your cash flow.
So it feels like a no-brainer. Is it something that anyone at that age, when they come to see you, it's just like, let's do this? Or are there risks associated? It's not right for some people?
It's not right for people that are already capping out their super contributions. It's also not necessarily right for people that have surplus cash flow. Because in that case, I'd probably just be saying, well, let's allocate that surplus cash flow as a tax-deductible contribution. If you don't need it, why are you pulling out that money from super as well? So you don't necessarily need the pension part at that phase. Though the transition to retirement pension is different to an account-based pension, which is what you can open when you get to 65 or if you're retired, and that's got 0% tax on earnings. And that's what we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But there's not a huge benefit of moving unless there's this tax arbitrage there to a transition to retirement, because your superannuation tax rates are the same. So it's really about the income that's coming out. Another benefit can be as well, though, is if at that point people still have a large mortgage and they're wanting to get rid of that, you can draw down a larger amount from that, up to 10% of the balance to help clear the mortgage. And that might help you retire earlier, right? Like if you've got this burden sitting there, you don't necessarily, you might want to continue working part-time. You might want to, transition to a different property that requires debt and things. So it becomes an additional source of cash flow within reason, within boundaries, I should
What
say.
percentage of people at that point coming to you with a mortgage?
It's more common than you'd think. Yeah.
And so is that still the priority? Get rid of it?
I think for a lot of people, we do tend to try and model out clearing your debt by the time that you're stopping working.
Yeah, I feel like most people in most situations couldn't stop work and still pay off their mortgage.
Yeah, and that said, though, a lot of people, when they get to that point, they might have 100 grand left or something like that.
True,
and it's a relatively small amount by comparison to the value of the property and things.
Yeah.
But, that is just cash flow. So at the end of the day, if you are able to pay it off in the lead up to retirement, fantastic. But if you're not, right, and you've, like in the case study we did last time, you've got all this extra money in superannuation because you've been using that as a tax-effective vehicle to grow, that's at the point where we go, cool, well, let's start a TTR pension. We'll pull it out at 60 and we'll clear the balance of the mortgage. That means you've got more cash flow during the years between 60 and 65. That might mean that you can work less.
Yeah.
It might, if superannuation is going to take care of you from that point onwards anyway. So
there are two use cases that you've mentioned there. One is just actually just making more money. Like just that first one is just a tax effective strategy. But I guess, topping up, making additional contributions to your super and supplementing your income with the TTR. Then there's also the paying off the mortgage. Are there any other sort of use cases that you commonly use this for?
They're probably the main two. It's really, this is the time of life where we really want to get as much money into superannuation as possible. So whilst the TTR strategy is concessional contributions, which we love because you get the tax deduction on them, a lot of the time we're actually putting considerable amounts of non-concessional contributions. So after tax contributions.
And is that to set yourself up with the account-based pension?
100%.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So really common ones that we see, either large parcels of shares that people have built up. We've got a lot of clients who got CBA shares and CSL shares and these things at the original listings, right? And they were what, $2, $3, and now they're 300 and 100. And they're worth a lot of money. Our goal is to sort of go, okay, well, as you capitalize on those and as you receive dividend income, if the money is enough, you're actually going to continue having to lodge a tax return every year. You're going to continue to do that. So if you want to keep holding CBA shares, fantastic, but let's sell them, contribute to super, make a concessional contribution, offset the capital gain, and rebuy the Commonwealth Bank share or the CSL share or whatever you want. If you want to keep holding that direct stock, but do it in a 0% tax environment.
Yeah.
The other benefit of that...
Are you allowed to do that? That's not like a wash sale or anything?
No, because
there's like a strategy for it.
Well, and it's two different ownerships. See, superannuation's a trust held for you.
True.
Investment assets held for you as a beneficiary. So
it's a change in investment strategy.
It's a change in beneficial ownership.
Yeah.
It's the technical language.
Yeah.
Around the ATO.
What is that?
Bryce is going to get arrested if he keeps talking like that. But no, I mean, like, you know, the government's also getting a percentage of that, right? They're getting contributions tax. So they're not that unhappy about you putting money into super. You're reducing the amount of tax payable on that capital gain, right? But you could technically hold that share forever and ever, never sell it, and never pay the capital gain.
Wait, how are you reducing the capital gain from the original sale? You're not. You're paying full freight on that, aren't you?
But if you then make a super contribution and claim the tax deduction,
You get a tax deduction.
Oh, is there a tax deduction there if you sell assets and
100%,
then
yeah.
add it to super? How much is the tax deduction?
well, capital gains is just income,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Oh, so
added.
then it's like a concessional contribution.
That's right. So then you make a
right,
concessional
right.
contribution.
Yeah.
So we'll do that with a lot of clients who have built up investment worth, and that's something that we'll do with clients in their 50s, or even their 40s, right? If they've built up considerable accumulation wealth, which is what, you know, a lot of the clients we deal with through the podcast and a lot of our accumulation clients are doing, will then start to transition their portfolios as they get closer. Right.
Yeah.
So as we get sort of within reaching distance,
Which is what?
well, it's
10
different
years?
for everyone, right? It depends on how much money you've got. You know, if you want to retire at 50, you have to have enough money for that 50 to 60 range.
Yeah.
If you want to retire at 58, well, we can put more money into super.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, everyone's goal is different. Everyone's retirement position is different. And like, that's why we have the conversation. What's important to you?
So for people who are moving into this transition to retirement account, how should they think about the investing questions? You know, managing volatility, I'm sure, is a question at the moment. Things around asset allocation. How do you approach those investing questions?
So it's very similar to broadly superannuation at that stage in your life anyway, right? Like as we get closer to drawing down, we want lower volatility. We want to be able to still get, you know, sustainable returns. We still want to have growth assets in there because they're what provide us income and the ability to sustain that income. We can't just go all cash or all bonds or anything like that. But it's no different to accumulation super in that when you're at that stage, you should be thinking about de-risking your portfolio slightly. So, you know, if you've historically had everything in a high growth portfolio, maybe in your 50s, that's when you start thinking about moving down to, say, like a growth, like an 80% allocation. Then you might, as you get closer to 60, might move to like a balanced approach and so on and so forth. I think there's a rhetoric around like, I still need to make money when I'm at this point. And I think that's where the modeling comes in real handy, because you can go, well, it's all well and good for you to continue doing this, but let's put some market shocks in there. Let's do some things. What happens if we have a GFC style event? And are you going to be comfortable not drawing down your normal amount for a year or 2 years to allow the market to recover?
Well, mentioning modelling is probably a good transition point to reintroduce Mr. Market to this conversation, Mr. Equity to this conversation. I'll get his name right eventually. And for people who want to play along at home, this resource that Dylan has prepared is available. Link is in the YouTube description or the show notes, so you can read along with us. But I guess what you've tried to demonstrate here is the actual benefit of this transition to retirement pension, like in terms of dollars and cents, for Mr. Equity, who is purely hypothetical.
Yeah, and I think over the 7 years between 60 and 7, it was just under $100,000 extra you end up in superannuation. You know, this is for someone who's earning 150 grand a year. So they've got plenty of superannuation contribution caps remaining. They're currently spending everything that they've got, so that's their income. But we worked out that the combination of the tax savings up front that you get and the Mr. Equity gets up until 67, the difference in sort of your overall outcome, including tax, is about 100 grand.
And so that's Mr. Equity still getting the full after-tax amount of his $150,000 salary.
Yeah, so you get about $106,000, $107,000. Don't quote me on that. Use paycalculator.com and figure out what 150 grand gets you after tax. But you'll get exactly the same amount of money after tax, but your superannuation will grow. That's why I said before, I love these strategies, right? Because there's literally no lose. There's no loss.
Yeah.
You've got the same amount of money in super you like invested over that time that you originally did, plus the little bit extra, and you get the same amount of cash in your pocket at the end of every month when you get paid.
And we should be clear that $100,000 benefit isn't dependent on like a certain superannuation balance.
It's more dependent on your income.
Yeah. So because it's just a tax saving.
It's a tax saving, right? More money in super means you can draw down more money in retirement.
And so for people listening, there's like, well, you've said this sort of, it's a no-brainer, but like just for the sake of completeness, is there a risk? Is there a downside? Is there a counterpoint to what you've said so far?
I think the way in which we see people do it wrong is the time, like trying to time things by, holding off on putting money in at the same time as you're drawing it out. So it's sort of, it is somewhat important that you've got things set up so that as your money goes in, often it's better to use like a salary sacrifice mechanism so it comes out of your pay rather than having to do it manually. And that way, when your superannuation pays you this monthly or quarterly or however frequently you've got that money coming out, it's sort of in and out at the same time. The other way in which we see people sometimes mess it up is if you try and calculate it yourself and you over contribute the 30,000, you'll get pinged with extra tax. So it's more important to get it. It's quite important to get it right because you don't want to get a tax bill at the end of the year for something you thought was a really good strategy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a nice segue to say equitymates.com/advice if you want to speak to Dylan and the team.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Give me a call.
So Dylan's made us 100 grand so far.
Yes.
How much can he make us in the second half of the episode?
Yeah.
Well, make Mr. Equity in the second half of this episode.
So the second strategy is a recontribution strategy. So let's just start with the basics. What is that, and how does it actually work?
Well, it's interesting, right? You said, how much can I make Mr. Equity? This is actually a strategy that we do for a lot of clients who, as I said at the start, are in a position where their superannuation balance is more than what they actually need in retirement, right? So we're forecasting that by the age of 87 or 90 or 100 or however long people think that they might want to live or go to live, that their superannuation is going to outlast them and generally quite considerably. So we talk about this intergenerational wealth transfer. When superannuation passes from the person who has built it up and earned it to a non-financial dependent. So this is really important. Non-financial dependent basically means anyone that's not a child under the age of 18 or a spouse. Or a spouse, right? So when that happens, there is a tax on the taxable portion of that's paid by the superannuation fund before the money goes. So the example we've given here is someone that starts with $1.5 million in super, and they're drawing down an income every year from their account-based pension, happy days, but they're 100% taxable, which means that they've accumulated that by their employers putting money in every month or however frequently. And that means that if that money was to pass to, say, one of their adult children who were also working and things at the time, they would probably cop a big tax bill on that. So a recontribution strategy is not so much about the individual, but it's actually about legacy planning. And it's about...
This is why we're saying if you're young and listening to this, send it to your parents.
Basically tell your mum and dad that they're going to give you money and the government's going to steal it.
Yeah. So yeah, you said it's not about the mum and dad per se. It's not about Mr. Equity, but it's about legacy planning.
So the purpose of a recontribution strategy is to take additional funds out of your account-based pension and then utilize the non-concessional contributions, which are after-tax contributions, putting money back into super, and as a result, that turns into non-taxable monies to be then passed on later. So over time, obviously, you can't just take the whole balance out and put it back in. You're only allowed to put in a certain amount each year. But over time, that changes the overall balance of that superannuation from being taxable to the beneficiaries to non-taxable to the beneficiaries. So each year you're able to contribute $120,000 non-concessionally. It'll probably go up year on year with, every few years with inflation and things. But the goal for us is to figure out how to get the most out of that, put it back in non-taxably, keep it in an account-based pension, so it's 0% tax on earnings that whole way. But it just means that you've got a lot more confidence about what your estate assets are going to be.
Love that. I'll send this to my parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So Dylan, you've done the work for us again here, and you've modelled it out for Mr. Equity. And sadly for Mr. Equity, he only lives until 74, but... No. Okay.
No.
That was just the modelling, I think.
So once you get to 74, you can't 74 and 11 months. You can't put any more money in super.
Really?
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's why we've modelled it to 74
Yeah,
because
Really?
once you hit 75, basically, so 74 and 11 months, you're not the only superannuation you're allowed to put in is the money that your employer pays you.
Right. Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to
No
know.
more
Well,
voluntary contributions.
Yeah. So the modelling here you've got is from 60 to 74. So 15 years inclusive of those 2 years. And Mr. Equity has worked hard his life and he started with a balance of 1.5 million at 60. And in this scenario, Mr. Equity is getting his 105,000, which, as we spoke about earlier, 105 or whatever was the post-tax amount. Yeah. But there's two scenarios. So one scenario, that's all he's taking. And then the other scenario, he's taking a bit extra and then recontributing that amount the same.
Yep.
So net, there's the same amount of assets. It's just one has gone through this recontribution cycle. So tell us what the numbers work out to be at 74 and 11 months.
So each year you're able to put 120,000 in non-concessionally. So effectively we take an extra 120,000 out. He doesn't spend it. He puts it back into super, and then that becomes a non-taxable amount. Right? The beautiful thing is that, as you said, assuming in this case he's not spending enough of that money, his money's actually growing, right, over that time, which is wonderful. It's ever so common. And a lot of us are going to continue to see that over the next 30 years, right? But really interestingly, you've got that taxable portion being 100% in the first case. If the people that inherit it happen to be adult children and they're working at the time, chances are they're going to pay 17% tax on that, which on a balance of 1.5 million, which was the starting balance of that pension, is like $365,000. If we look at it like for like, and that person's gone through, built up their wealth, they at 75, they got about 2.1 mil in superannuation. If they pay 17% tax, if that goes to an adult beneficiary who's working, they're going to pay 17% tax on that taxable portion, which is $365,000
of tax, yeah.
Of tax.
Because the taxable portion is 100%.
Is 100%.
Yeah.
Which is actually what most commonly, that's what most commonly it is. So any money that we put in voluntarily and claim a tax deduction on, it's going to make up the taxable portion. Any money that our employers put in makes up the taxable portion. So
scenario number one, 100% taxable, $365,000 in tax.
Which means on your 2.1 and a bit million of superannuation that goes to your kids, actually only 1.78 goes to them.
Okay. And so then the second scenario has this recontribution strategy. So for starters, the superannuation balance is the same because, as we said, net, that money's being recycled back in, recontributed back in.
That's right.
But it's not 100% taxable anymore. So what percentage of the balance is taxable?
So over that time, assuming that you're able to get the 120 in every year, and all things else being equal, you manage to split that 2.1 to about 815,000 and 1.3 million. So 815,000 remains taxable, right? Unfortunately, that was the most that we could do over that strategy. But 1.3 million of it is now non-taxable, which means that for the same beneficiaries, the same outcome, exactly the same, the kids now only pay 138,000 of tax. So the net amount is just over 2 million instead of 1.78.
So that's $220,000 more inherited by the children.
Absolutely.
It feels like a no-brainer, again, but like you've got to be in a decent position to do this, right?
You do have to be in a relatively good position, but it's also important to recognise that, not everyone outlasts their superannuation, and in most cases we don't outlast our superannuation. That will become increasingly common over the coming years, and there is no real downside of doing something like this. I'm a big believer in actually, this is important, but if you've got superannuation that continues beyond that point, probably helping your kids out before you get to that stage, and maybe taking some extra money out over that time and just passing it on as house deposits and additional ways for them to invest personally throughout their journey. It's nice to know, I think, for a lot of parents and grandparents as well, that their money is not, when they pass away, as much of that money is actually going to get to their kids rather than being eaten up in tax. But, if you are in this situation, it's a really good, it's a really good way of making sure that you're sort of passing on all your hard-earned wealth.
But I
Estate
guess
planning.
But I guess there's no as far as I can understand it, there's no downside. Let's say you had Mr. Market had Mr. Equity had half of what he had here, like 750,000. Like there would be no downside in him taking out extra each year and then recontributing it. He wouldn't be any worse off financially, even if he wasn't sure if his super would outlast him or he would outlast his super.
100%.
Is that right?
Yeah, like we do this with majority of our clients who have balances between that sort of 500 and 1.5 million base. It doesn't take the 10 years if you've got 750,000. Right?
Eventually you get to 100% non-taxable.
Yeah. But it's a really key strategy because that's important. It's really important for a lot of people to pass on a legacy of some sort, right? Like we build wealth all of our lives and we want our kids to be ahead. But it's also important, as I say, you've got to give to your kids while you're alive, right? You'd rather see them be happy whilst you're alive rather than, have all that money.
Rather than have 2 million in your super. So Dylan, as we got to the ad break, I asked, how much more are you going to save us? I think we said 220,000 for the second half of the episode, which takes us to 320,000 saved in a 40-minute conversation. That is now the bar for all future Ask an Advisor episodes. So you've set the bar there. I think if people want to speak to you, equitymates.com/advice will put you in touch. And if people feel like this episode isn't relevant to them yet, make sure you share it with your parents.
Big time. And a reminder that if you missed the last episode with Dylan, go back and listen to it. It'll be in your feed, but also there's a downloadable resource to show you the difference between debt recycling, mortgage offset account, and investing in superannuation. That episode went off, and I think you started the craze here at Equity Mates for debt recycling.
So should we talk about being in retirement? Debt recycling.
So if you want to debt recycle, also speak to Dylan at equitymates.com/advice. He can do it all. I can't wait to see what downloadable resource he will bring next time. You set the bar high, Dylan, so we can't wait to see you jump over it again.
Happy days.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks for having me, boys. Good to be back.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.